Yeah, Nolan Arenado, 1 for 4, 3 Ks, but he had the hit that mattered, the 2-run homer to beat the Marlins last night, and still on the season, just on a torrid pace. 368 average. His OPS is over 1,300. I know it's very early. It's 10 games in. Cardinals are looking good. Nolan Arenado last year, though, even though his numbers weren't bad, I know his batting average was down, what was it, 255 to what he wanted it to be, but his baseball card stats, homers, RBI, were still up there. But he was disappointed. He was disappointed last year, and if you have a motivated Nolan Arenado and he can be even better than last season, that's pretty scary.
Here's the thing I like from Nolan this year so far. Obviously, yes, very early, but that I didn't like as much last year is that the on base percentage is up. Because one thing, he was driving runs in last year, he's doing that. The average was down, but also the on base percentage was low. He's just at 3.312 last year, 31% times on base. This year he's up to 44, and it's huge because we talked about this yesterday, but to look back at it now, the bottom half of the lineup. I mean, basically, 45% of the lineup yesterday, 2 for 17 after Nolan. So, I mean, that's kind of the definition of where you look at a guy and you look at big value, because if we're getting into some situations here where if he doesn't do it, and I guess if Albert's not playing, no matter how weird it is to say that in 2022, it might not happen until it comes back around top again.
Yeah, Nolan Arenado is slugging almost 900 and has 5 bombs now in 10 games. So do I think he's going to hit 81 homers? No, but a great start to the season for Nolan Arenado. And I also think just early on, I don't read too much into guys that are really struggling or going off. I think it does matter in some cases more than others. For example, Tommy Edmond. And Tommy Edmond was 2 for 4. He's hitting 371. I mean, his OPS is over 1,100. And that was a guy where I did think and still think it's important that he gets going offensively for several reasons. So his first year, going back to 2019, you forget that was a 3.45. We're talking 300 average, 400 on base, 500 slug guy, but it was only about a 90-game sample size.
Right.
And I think that made a lot of people wonder, is that who Tommy Edmond is offensively? And I don't think he's that player, because that player was really, really good. Now, I think he's going to be a plus offensive player, but just not to that level. Like, I don't think at the end of the year, Tommy Edmond will be slugging 500. That doesn't mean he can't hit a ton of doubles and get a bunch of extra base hits. But remember, Tommy Edmond really, really struggled in spring training. So after a couple years where you didn't love the offense, even though you loved the defense, especially last year, he won a Gold Glove. And then Tommy Edmond really, really struggled in spring training. I do think a guy like that, it's important for him to get off to a good start. Oh, by the way, you have Nolan Gorman pushing in AAA, just hitting bomb after bomb after bomb.
Yeah, well, he's on another planet right now, and that's good pressure to have. I think it's a little different, to feel that pressure coming up and to know the guy you're looking over your shoulder at isn't even in the dugout with you yet, but he's around, and you know what you got to do to stay active there. But I think the thing about Tommy Edmond that still is defining it. First of all, last night, he definitely was the kickstarter early in the game last night. He infield single, chopped one in the second time, stole a base. I mean, he was really out there moving around. But I think that what I need from Tommy Edmond and what I think the team could benefit from is just be what Colton Wong was at the plate. Not that 2019 season where he just went nuts, but even the following season. He was on base. Wong that year was 265, 350, 326. I mean, that's all you really need from a guy at the top of the lineup. Get on base and give Goldschmidt, O'Neill, Arenado a chance, and then you figure out the rest of it after that.
And last night was also, that's pretty tough sledding. Sandy Alcantara is really, really good. And we were talking before the show started just about Cardinal trades and trades that have worked and trades that haven't. And I always say you gotta gauge the trade when it happens. Did it make sense? Then of course there's the actual production from the player. Like you can't look at Randy Arozarena right now and be like, okay, that's a good trade for the Cardinals because Liberatore, I mean, right now, and when that trade happened, you needed an outfielder that could produce. Remember, this is before Tyler O'Neill came around, and really started producing. This is before Dylan Carlson started producing in the big leagues. The guy you needed was somebody like Randy Arozarena, and you traded that guy away. I do think when they made the deal for Marcell Ozuna, I loved that deal when it happened for whatever reason. And the Cardinals knew they had to give up something to get guys. Look, they were also interested in Giancarlo Stanton. They're also interested in Christian Yelich. And the Marlins had 3 talented young outfielders, and you have to give up Sandy Alcantara, a Zach Gallen for guys like that. And Alcantara's been really, really good. Just for whatever reason, Marcell Ozuna, his 2 years here, he was okay. But then since he's left again, I know he has his own issues. He's back on the field now, but last year he had his own domestic issue. But he's been crazy good again since going to the Braves.
And, and the thing I think about Ozuna is that, again, that was one of the bigger, I think, dice tosses that they've made as far as going out and getting a guy because, you knew that the price was going to be high. The Marlins were acquiring, big trade chips and getting people out right there. And I think that obviously the best return they got in that deal came from the Cardinals out of all that people they traded out of that outfield because, you get Alcantara, they get him signed in the offseason. He's one of those bad market aces that I think that his value is going to pick up more later on when the next deal comes along and they need to move him over. But, when you look at what this team needs right now, and we've debated that over the last couple of weeks, it's a completely different outlook if he's at the top of the rotation. But at the time, I think we all felt like they had to do something. Stanton said no. He doesn't want to come. His power is in his hands. Yelich, I think Derek Gould has said multiple times what they asked for Yelich from the Cardinals was such a huge package, it would have changed the dynamic of the team in a way they weren't willing to go to. So that was the acceptable piece, was moving Alcantara because they wanted to hold Flaherty. So I'll throw this at you, up to anybody that wants to speak to it. Which piece would you rather have, looking at it now, between Flaherty and Alcantara?
Well, that specific question, the answer is Alcantara. And I say that because, look, is Flaherty a better overall pitcher, I think, than Sandy Alcantara? I believe he is when healthy.
Agreed.
But the different part of this conversation is, so Flaherty's been banged up, but also I just don't see Jack Flaherty as the type of guy who's going to stay with the Cardinals. And the only reason I say that is because this guy, he was the union rep. He's an LA guy. He's very into the business of baseball, and he was very vocal during the lockout. And if he has a couple good seasons or even one good season right as he enters free agency, a guy like that I think is going to want to test the market. I don't think he's going to give the Cardinals any type of hometown discount. Yeah. And at this point also, you see some of these 2-year deals, for example, what the Cardinals gave Harrison Bader. So they buy out his arbitration years, but they make it incentive laden where he can also make some more money. It's almost like your arbitration hearing. Instead of sitting there and arguing, you're giving the player a chance to make that extra money on the field with incentives. Well, if you're Jack Flaherty and he got his deal, $5 million this year?
Yeah.
Okay, so next year he's going to be ARB eligible again for the final time. At this point, there's no point of Jack Flaherty just signing a deal for next year. And I don't think he's going to give the Cardinals one free agent year at all. So I would be shocked if Jack Flaherty doesn't hit free agency, and the Cardinals are not the type of team that win free agent bids like that. And so that's where, look, Sandy Alcantara is really good, and he's already got a deal. So he's getting paid. Look, this year he's making, 3.8, but he's making 6.3 next year, 9.3, and then 25, 26, 27, he's making 17 million, and he's got an option, a couple options there. Well, his 2027 option is $21 million. So that's the other part of this. If you're the Marlins, you control Sandy Alcantara, who's a really good young pitcher, until his age 31 season. And with the Cardinals, you're looking at basically a year and a half left of Jack Flaherty. This is a different conversation, but if I'm the Cardinals this coming off season, if you don't have a deal done with Jack Flaherty,
gotta think about it.
Honestly, if you're gonna lose that guy, I know the Cardinals are in a window to win, so that's more difficult to make a move like that. But if Jack Flaherty is healthy the rest of this season, you could also get a haul for somebody like that.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think that last thing I'll say about Alcantara, because we were talking a little bit about the show about what would the team look like with some of the people that have left from it. Pretty happy with the Cardinals outfield these days. Carlson's off to a slow start. His stock has not dropped at all in my book. Bader's off to a slow start. Stock has not dropped at all. O'Neill, I think the world of. But there's been a lot that they've lost from the outfield. But one place they have been pretty risk averse, and I think it's because of the depth they've got and some of the other deals they've made, is on the hump. They got arms. So losing Alcantara, you got to lose some things in order to get some things. And they went out to go get Ozuna for a purpose, and you didn't keep him. That's fine. But what you need to learn from the situation that happened there with Ozuna is that the Cardinals don't deal guys too often that they think they won't be able to re-sign. You need to consider what you've got to look at now in order to get something back for what you didn't give up Flaherty for in the first place. Because you would have, if you put him in a Yelich deal, Yelich signed. He stayed. He stayed in Milwaukee. He definitely would have stayed in St. Louis. So you got to think about how all those things are connected in my book.
And the funny thing about the Ozuna deal, as I look at it here, so this was December 14th, 2017. So that package was Daniel Castano, Zach Gallen, who, when healthy, has also been really, really good.
Has been good.
So they flipped him. The Marlins flipped him to the Diamondbacks, and he had a couple good years there. But remember the guy who we don't talk about at all anymore, but we talked about a lot, was good old Mag Sierra.
Wow.
Mag Sierra was also in that deal.
I forgot about him.
And I don't want to say that he was the centerpiece, because he wasn't. Because Sandy Alcantara, I think everybody knew he was going to be a pretty dang good pitcher. But for that season, 2017, we talked a lot about Mag Sierra. And when he was up there, he was scoring a run in every game. But then you look at that guy, he didn't profile as an everyday major league player, but he was a fun weapon. He was a fun speed weapon that you had at the time that can do things, stealing bases defensively. But I don't think it should also surprise us that Mag Sierra hasn't exactly torn the baseball world up the last 4 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, we've got it. There's another version of Mag Sierra in the Cardinals system, if not 2 or 3 already right now. Like that doesn't really burn you. I think that his success that he had, though, you were able to put him into that deal, and it was an upside for Florida at that time. So, I mean, because they gave him every chance to be the guy out there, and it just didn't work out.
So in a very small sample size, 2017 with the Cardinals, it was only 22 games. He only had 64 plate appearances. But Mag Sierra hit .317, and he scored 10 runs in 22 games. He was on base .359. Now, he only slugged .317. You knew this guy was not going to be a power hitter. But since then with Miami, the next year he hit a .190. He was pretty good in a small sample size 2019. 2020, he hit .250. Last year, he hit .230. So no power whatsoever. He can steal you a bag here and there. He had 11 stolen bases. But here we are now 5 years later, and I don't think anybody's really complaining that Mag Sierra is no longer a Cardinal.
You don't complain about it because of some of the other guys that aren't, because when you can look at Randy Ozarena, if you can look at guys like Adolis Garcia, there's been a lot that's gone out. And to the Cardinals' credit, I think they've done pretty good work at covering back off of it and trying to make some decisions. But when you look at some of the moves that got made, to try to get the outfield solidified, Jason Hayward, Ozuna, all the things that they had to do and send out, happy with the outfield now? Maybe could be slightly better. But the point about Hayward and those guys is that the Cardinals have not done a great job of re-signing guys that are looking for big paydays. So let's think about what that means when you've got another person coming up that could be looking for that.
So the Ozuna trade wasn't a good deal. I think that's fair to say, obviously, but you got to think short-term versus long-term deal, right? So, like, in the moment, I actually liked the deal because we didn't realize how much potential Sandy really had. I mean, I'm not working in the organization and whatnot like you guys are, so you guys probably saw firsthand how good he really was. Same with Randy. Like, the Randy deal wasn't good, but at the same time, well, I can't defend that one. But the one with Sandy, though, it felt right getting Ozuna because I don't know, we just didn't have a full set of outfielders yet. I mean, Dexter wasn't really panning out. He was okay. But it just felt like we really needed a more like bona fide number 4, number 5 hitter on our team at the time. You got to think short-term versus long deal because now it's easy to look back 5 years later when Ozuna's been gone for 2 years and Sandy's looking like an ace on a team, and you're thinking, oh my God, what do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that completely. I think at that time, it reminded me of when we talked about it yesterday, the Ludwig time period when they went and got Holiday. They needed Marcell Ozuna at that time. So you've got to give up what you've got to give up. One thing I'll say, though, about that is that I still think that the Arozarena trade is TBA because Matthew Liberatore could come up and have an Adam Wainwright like impact for the team potentially, as far as you get a more talented guy than you thought you would get at the time, and he's exactly what the organization needed when they got him.
I would think that Matthew Liberatore, you would think he's going to be a steady. I'm not saying an ace, but you would think that Matthew Liberatore, whenever he arrives, and maybe it's in the bullpen at first this year, but I would think he's going to be a steady 2-3. Middle of the rotation starter type guy that should be dependable for a long time. So I think that's fair to say. It's just, though, that when they traded Randy Arozarena, I think what we have to remember is they needed that guy. Because, again, this was before the breakout of O'Neill. This was before Dylan Carlson really arrived. And at the time, Lane Thomas was in the discussion. Harrison Bader still was inconsistent offensively. So I remember after that playoff series and the World Series, and Randy Arozarena goes crazy. And then John Mozeliak holds a press conference. And I remember that he opened that press conference before even being asked. He started talking about Randy Arozarena. Now, clearly he knew that was going to be a topic. Mm-hmm. But it was also about, look, we have to be really smart in scouting other teams' players. But first and foremost, we have to be better or best at scouting our own players. If we have a guy like that in our system and we have not given him really a shot to shine, to show that's on us. And that was the case with Randy Arozarena. If you look up his numbers, again, it's a very small sample size, but he didn't fail with the Cardinals.
No.
He didn't. He didn't have a chance. He didn't get enough at-bats for the Cardinals to see what he could do at the big league level. And the few opportunities he got, he was actually good.
Yeah, I think that probably of all the moves that they've made in recent history, at least, is one where they just really underestimated what they had or didn't believe the numbers. Because, I remember that season. He was hitting 358 at Memphis that year. He had hit just over 300. He was ascending. So this is a guy that was going through the system, getting better, and ascending in real time. And, sometimes it just comes down to who do you want to put your chips behind. And I think that when you look at Harrison Bader at that point in time, they looked at him and they said, this is our top prospect. This is a guy that's exciting, that's getting the job done. And I don't think that they looked at the potential of playing them alongside each other. And they made the move that they made. Whereas Tampa said, well, we got Kevin Kiermaier. He's going to get hurt soon enough. We know that's coming. We'll put him over here and we'll move him out as we need to.
And here's another part of the Ozuna deal, which we were talking about earlier. So when they made that deal, Ozuna, he had been a bit inconsistent with the Marlins, but his good seasons were really good. And you made that trade after by far his best season in 2017, where he's an all-star. Ozuna had 37 homers, 124 RBIs. He hit 312. You forget also, he won a Gold Glove, which you laugh about now because I think when you think about Marcell Ozuna's tenure with the Cardinals, and I'll get to his numbers because they're actually better than you think. But when I think of Marcell Ozuna, I think of three things, unfortunately. And I'm talking about with the Cardinals. He had a domestic issue here more recently, but in his Cardinals tenure, first of all, that video surfaced of he and Carlos Martinez outside of the strip club at the street meat stand in a nice little brawl back in the day. Mm-hmm. And that was actually before he even was traded.
Right.
I was at the game where Marcell Ozuna...
Oh, I thought you said you were there.
I was not there that particular night.
Okay.
But I was at the game covering it whenever that year was. I guess it would have been 2018, where Marcell Ozuna overslept and kind of showed up at the park right around game time. And then the other issue, which is why I bring up the Gold Glove, is the famous Marcell Ozuna wall climb, where he had the Spider-Man move, remember? And the ball was not. He was he was climbing the wall, but the ball wasn't close.
Right there. It landed right where he had been at about 5 seconds before.
So remember, though, that's a Gold Glover.
That's a first base Gold Glove, it feels like.
I would also say when you go back to the Alcantara trade, don't forget that you still had Luke Weaver on your roster. You still had Dakota Hudson, who was rising through the ranks. He made the team later that season as a relief pitcher. And those three guys, Weaver, Flaherty, and Hudson, had all been the minor league pitchers of the year in 3 straight years for the Cardinals. So they're evaluating their internal candidates. And to be honest with you, having watched all of them come through the system, Sandy was a guy who was a thrower. And I know that's cliche, like he was a thrower and you learn to be a pitcher, and obviously he's turned out to what he has been. But it's hard. Like, you're evaluating your own guys, and sometimes you're wrong. But, I think it's cool to see how Sandy, his talent has really blossomed at the major league level to the point. I mean, watching him last night was just flat out pretty cool. And that's a guy that's really put in a lot of work to be as good as he is.
And Nate, to that point, I think that's a great point, because obviously with the moves that they made afterwards, you had to have all of those guys available to even be able to make those moves. So you needed Weaver, you needed Gallen to get Goldschmidt and do all that. Now, one thing I'll say about this before we turn the corner is that for all the moves that you might debate in the town about what Mo has done and what prospects got used and what didn't get used, I feel like there should be absolute absolution of his sins for what that Arenado deal was, because it cost absolutely not. This is Austin Gomber. Austin Gomber's the 4th, 5th guy in the rotation right now for the Cardinals, and you got $50 million gift card with it. I think that you need to forgive all of the mediocre reliever deals that have happened and knock off one of the bad outfield moves and one of the big prospect moves for that, because that's one of the heists of all time.
And that's where, but also with Goldschmidt, the ability to sign those guys after you trade for them. Mm-hmm. You trade for these guys, you sign them, and also, okay, they're on the other side of 30, and Arenado's making, $35 million. Goldschmidt's making a ton of money. But they're also good overall baseball players that as they age, okay, the offensive numbers are probably going to come down, but you're talking about elite defenders, really good baseball players, really good base runners. And I don't think we're going to look at those contracts and say, with all these deals, okay, the last year and a half, it might not be great, but I don't see those guys falling off. And I'm telling you, I don't mean to keep going back to Marcell Ozuna, but I think the exact same thought process went through with Marcell Ozuna. I think if it worked out differently with Marcell Ozuna, I think the Cardinals would have loved to sign Marcell Ozuna once they brought him in. You forget, too, again, I mentioned the year before, he finished his 15th in the MVP. His 2 years with the Cardinals, I don't think they're as bad as we think. I mean, he had 23 bombs and 88 RBI the first year, 29 and 89. His OPS was 758 and 800, which is kind of around what his career was with the Marlins in some of those average years. The problem is his year before with the Marlins was unbelievable.
Right.
His year after, which was the COVID year, he freaking led the league in homers and RBI. Now, that's a 60-game season, but still, he was 6th in the MVP. And when he's been healthy on the field and not dealing with the domestic stuff, he's still really productive. This year, I mean, it's only 14 games, but he's got a 291 average. He's not an on-base guy, but he's slugging 582. So he's still a legit power threat. And this year is his age 31 season. So he's not old.
Yeah, I think that most of the way that the Ozuna deal is looked at is a little bit of what woulda, coulda. But I think you got what you signed up for with him.
He got to the NLCS in 19, and I don't know if you get to the NLCS without Marcell Ozuna in there. Now, you could make the case, all right, what if you gave O'Neill the at-bats in those years that you had Ozuna? Would he have flourished like he has now? That was always kind of the debate. If you threw it out there, if you look at his stats, he played in 61 games in 18 or something like that, hit 9 home runs. If you give him a full season, I don't know. But you got to get established hitters in your lineup. And this all goes back to, I know it's kind of an easy card to play, but my goodness, when you're running the baseball ops and you lose a talent that is as freakish as Oscar Taveras, you have to go to wit's end to try to patch that void. And the Cardinals had to dig into their minor league plethora of arms in order to fill the void.
2 teams playing last night that took the 2 biggest losses in that department in baseball history recently with Jose Fernandez and Oscar Taveras. 2 teams that completely changed the way that they were going to go about their plans. Even if Miami was going to move Fernandez, you would have gotten back something for him that would have been incredible. And obviously the Cardinals' entire trajectory and plan changed with Oscar Tavares. So great point there.
And who was the Royals?
Ventura.
Yeah,
Giordano.
Yeah, you had a really rough stretch there for a couple years with some of those Dominican players, and then Jose Fernandez down in Miami. So on the text line, 855-282-8255, it's the 636 says, does Arenado opt out this year? And I kind of laughed about that because we joked about it last year. It's so early in the season. Here's my thing with this. So I was looking at what Arenado is owed. So in the next 5 years, he's going to make $35 million, $35 million, $32 million, $27 million. Then they added that $15 million season when the deal happened. So my quickie math there is 102, 129. That's $144 million, if my math is correct, that Nolan Arenado is owed over the next 5 seasons. So that equals about what? A little under $30 million per season on average.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with these monster deals is the reason most of these guys get the money, like a Bryce Harper deal, and you get the 13 years, you usually get a lot of those prime years. So for Nolan Arenado to opt out right now, a team is not going to get his age 28, 29, 30, and 31 season like the Rockies and Cardinals got with his original deal. They're getting his age 32 through 36 season. Now, could he get something similar to that? I think that's an interesting question, especially if he continues to just go bonkers. But can he, on the free agent market, entering his age 32 season, would he get a better deal than a 5-year, $144 million deal? I'm not so sure about that. But then again, some of these guys are getting deals paid till they're age 40.
Yeah, boy, that's a tough call. Can I do a Mike Greenberg tease about Nolan Arenado?
Greeny?
So let me do a Greeny tease here. Does Nolan Arenado have enough time on his Cardinal contract to be the greatest third baseman in franchise history?
Let's clean up and wrap up this baseball segment. I want to read your texts, and I'm very glad you're texting in. Keep them coming. We want you listeners to be involved in the program. Our guy Kyle says, another thing about Alcantara when he was in Springfield was that he had diminished velocity. Let's see. Kiselich, or is it Kliss LLC? Let me know, because your name, it's just way too many consonants. But Flaherty doesn't seem to like being a Cardinal. I don't think that's true at all. I think that's a false narrative. That's a different conversation than a guy who wants to hit free agency. I don't look at Jack Flaherty and say, oh, he doesn't enjoy being a Cardinal. I look at Jack Flaherty and say he's a businessman who's going to hit free agency, and the Cardinals aren't going to be able to keep him.
Yeah,
which is different.
Yeah, Jack Flaherty is determined. He sees what guys are getting paid, and he says, I'm going to go out and I'll wait it out. I mean, you can make a pretty good living going year to year at $5 million a year. Be all right.
Kyle also chiming in, our guy Kyle. He knows his baseball. Ozuna was terrible down the stretch in 2019. Part of the failure of Mike Schilt was his unwillingness to spice up the outfield down the stretch. It's part of the reason why they almost laid an egg, too. Also part of the reason why they traded Arozarena, because he didn't even get a chance that month with 3 outfielders who couldn't hit to save their lives. That is 100% accurate. Jim in Crestwood said, guys, let's not forget about Kenny Boyer at third base. 64 MVP, won 5 Gold Gloves. That's from Jim in Crestwood. Gino Ojic, of course, bringing up Scott Rowland. Gino, I love you, man. You got to clean up the typos. Whatever you're trying to say about Scott Rowland or versus Kenny Boyer. So clearly you got Ken Boyer, Scott Rowland. Nolan Arenado would have to play here for a good 5-6 years to enter that conversation, which you'd think he's going to. I don't think he's going to opt out. But I do believe that if he just goes crazy this year, that starts to be a conversation. Last year, I laughed at that. This year, if that man goes nuts and what he wants is just a longer term, I don't think there's any way he gets the AAV starting at age 32 with his deal. But if he wants the term, that's a different conversation where now he's looking more at total dollars as opposed to AAV, because he got the AAV early.
Yeah. So I pulled up a little bit. First of all, Thank you so much for everybody buying into the greenie teas. That was fantastic. I loved it. We'll do more of those. But when I looked at Arenado, he's second for third baseman in the last 22 years, second in slugging percentage of them all. He's sandwiched right in between Alex Rodriguez and just above Chipper Jones. Good company in that place there. But yeah, I think he's got to play at least the time Roland did here to be compared to him. If he opts out after this year, no, it's another Marcell Ozuna stopping through town situation. But I get no feeling that he wants to leave playing here.
Well, he'll want to get paid, though. And if this is a dude who wants to play till age 40, that changes the conversation because his contract takes him through his age 36 season. So I could see him wanting to kind of reshift that because you understand that when a guy hits 36, he's not getting that big deal for his age 37 through 40 seasons.
Yeah.
The better value, even though he's not 28 anymore, is to redo that deal at the end of this year. That's where I do understand that if he's looking for, let's say, $200 million total dollars, it makes more sense to restructure that in an opt-out situation this year because he's got 5 years and $144 million left. Now, I don't think anybody's going to give him higher than a $30 million AAV for 5 years, but what if he was looking for a $24 million AAV for the next 8 years? That's the type of deal because look at Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper got a 13-year deal. I mean, he's getting paid through what? Around age 40 or so? That's not crazy talk.
So here's the thing when I look at Nolan and where we just look at average value in the league right now. So right now his AAV is at 32.5 per year. That checks in number 2 in the league, right behind Anthony Rendon, who got that huge deal in Anaheim. So, in comparison to where he's at in the market, doing pretty good. But you want to shore yourself up. You want to get there. But the question I'll throw out about that is a lot got made about the Cardinals coming out of the labor stoppage and everything and coming down lower in salary where they were a year ago. I think a little bit of that has to be planning, though. It's got to be planning ahead for what you've got coming up because they've got some big decisions to make here about a lot of the guys we've talked about today, about Bader. They're already talking about the O'Neill deal coming up, what that's going to look like. And if you've got to throw money for Nolan in there, too, that's a big shakeup. Even if you already are kind of realizing you might not be paying that top dollar for Flaherty because maybe he's going to go into the market.
And that's where I'm looking at the Bryce Harper deal. So he's through his age 38 season. So Arenado's current deal takes him through his age 36 season. But kind of look at the money, how it plays out. So next year for Arenado, it's $35 million, $35 million, $32 million, $27 million, $15 million. Now look at Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper's average is more like 27, 25, 26-ish. So in his age 32 season, which is not until 2025, he's making $27.5 million for about 5 or so years. And his last couple years, he's making $23.5 million. So I do think that's a good barometer. If I'm Nolan Arenado, I'd like to turn that age 36 season where I'm only making $15 million, and I'd like to tack on a couple of extra years where Bryce Harper's already making $23, $24 million. I think that's a pretty fair comp. Don't you think? I know Bryce Harper, he's a bigger name, better raw power, but for overall baseball player, Nolan Arenado, he's going to put himself in the conversation for the greatest defensive third baseman of all time. I think it's fair to compare contracts of Arenado and Bryce Harper. And if I'm Nolan Arenado, I'm looking at that final year of making $15 million, and I'm looking at uncertainty the next 2 years, and I would try to turn those years into about $24, $25 million seasons.
So if you're the Cardinals, what do you say, though?
I would sign him.
So here's the thing that I look around. You always got to look around what's going to happen around him in his market, too. Look at his position. Rafael Devers is coming up soon, and Boston hasn't been able to work out anything with him. Matt Chapman's going to come up in that time. You've also got Alex Bregman, who's going to come up in that time. And you just had Jose Ramirez, who signed a 7-year extension for $141. That's going to be locking him in at around $24 million over that same time period, basically. So I think with all of those things being accounted for, and then you put in the work that Nolan is already got on his resume, that if you can level him off after this year and you can make him have that longer-term security, maybe you get him to agree to shift a little money around so that you can really capitalize on the competitive window you got here at the middle of his prime, Cardinals are in a good place, and they can do some other things too.
I also think he likes it here.
That's what I think too.
I do. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean he's going to take some ridiculous hometown discount.
No.
But I think this man wants to win, and his last couple years with Colorado, I don't think he enjoyed playing baseball, and I really think he enjoys playing for the Cardinals. And last year, the Cardinals were pretty good. They make a wild card. He hasn't even really experienced real Cardinals postseason baseball at Busch Stadium. He just had his first real opening day.
Mm-hmm.
Even last year was weird with COVID, right? It wasn't a typical year. He's just starting to experience what Cardinals baseball, real winning baseball, is like. And so that doesn't mean he's going to take a hometown discount.
No.
But I don't think the Cardinals also want him to leave. That's a different part of this conversation. The Cardinals did a lot of work to make that deal happen. And this man, even last year, Gold Glove, 30 homers, 100 RBI. Right now, he's on pace to be in the MVP conversation. I don't think the Cardinals will want him to go.
Here's one thing about the Cardinals you've always got, and you can look at the timeline, and it always connects. There's always a signature guy with the Cardinals who is on that Hall of Fame track. They brought Nolan here to be that guy. You've got the Yachty and Pujols and Wainwright Twilight series that's going on this year. But when those guys are done, Nolan's the guy. He's the guy for the franchise. He's the guy that needs to be on the back of the jerseys. I think jersey sales is always a good way to understand how important a guy is. And for that, I think the Cardinals pay the price for it, even if it means they go a little bit longer than I think is in their comfort zone.
Yeah, nobody wants to pay a dude till age 38, but you have to keep that guy. To keep that guy for age 32, 33, 34, when he's still going to be, you'd think, really, really productive. Text line 855-282-8255. Let's get your text in on the transfer portal, on NIL, on college basketball. I want to talk about Jay Wright retiring, and we'll do that after the break. I always have poor planning, but I wanted to read your text. I appreciate that. Gino Ojic, he clarifies. He said he needs 4 good years. This is Arenado. 4 good years more to pass Boyer, Torrey, and Roland to get into that conversation to be the best Cardinals third baseman of all time. Rockwood Rectal Rooter says Flaherty needs to show he can stay healthy if he wants Bueller money, and he hasn't shown that yet. Kurt Warner says, sup, Charlie. Sup, Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner also says, Charlie, do you think Molina for $10 million or Pujols for $2.5 million is a better deal? Well, right now, we're 10 games into the season. That's a no-brainer. Albert Pujols behind Arenado and Edmond, he's been right there as your second or third best hitter.
Yeah.
And Yachty, you understand the deal. Whatever he went through, that he came to camp late for a personal reason, I think it's fair to say Yachty, for many, many years, showed up in ridiculously good shape. I don't think that was the case this year, and that's part of the reason why he's not getting a lot of starts. He didn't have a long spring training. They're just kind of working him in, working back-to-back games and all that. So, I mean, right now, the Pujols deal for $2.5 million, even when it happens,
still of the year,
you can make money off that just on ticket sales and merchandise, especially if he gets to 700. But I mean, hell, the fact that he's slugging what he is right now and hitting bombs.
Have we got the latest numbers on the Pujols jerseys, or did they just say roll the old ones back from the first time?
This is where people will be mad at me. People will be mad at me. But the problem with Pujols is you got a lot of Cardinals fans. We didn't have a lot of burning of the jerseys.
No.
I saw a little bit of that, but it wasn't to the LeBron level. When LeBron left Cleveland, the first time?
Yeah.
There was all the burning of the jerseys. And then he comes back. I can't remember if he switched numbers like Kobe did.
He did not. No, he came back to 23 there. He switched numbers when he got out east.
Okay.
Out west.
And also, the Cleveland Cavs, in my opinion, as we're going off on a tangent, have terrible uniforms. They always change their colors. I don't understand why they have this, whatever the burgundy or brick red with
it's
the
the
yellow.
ketchup and mustard packet.
It's really stupid. The old school Mark Price, Brad Doherty Cavs were way better. I don't know why they got away from that. The same reason the Pistons had the beautiful red, white, and blues. And for the weird couple Grant Hill years, they went to a stupid teal jersey with a dumb logo.
Was it the basketball hoop?
It was off. It was like
a motor
horse.
with a horse.
A motor, a horse. It was teal. I remember my little brother. My little brother had a Grant Hill teal jersey. And even back then, I'm like, why are you doing this? You have a classic look. Red, white, and blue.
I kind of felt this way with the Cardinal away Saturday jersey. I thought they were trying to throw too many things together.
With the creams or with the
82 blue. And they combined it with the 40 style jersey that wasn't the jersey they wore in the 40s anyway. And I was like, what are we doing here, guys? They just might as well just cap it off and put the dark blue hat on and just make it look completely ridiculous.
I agree with you. What I liked about the jerseys back in the day, it was a different time. You had the Sansa belt pants.
Yeah.
And you had the pullover look. That's a good look. Then the Cardinals brought those back with the piping down the middle. And I also think just that color, it seemed like it played in the 80s. It played in the just kind of all the cookie cutter domes. Like when I think of 80s baseball, I think of a bunch of circular domes that all look the same. I think of AstroTurf, and I think of Sansa belt pants with pullover, colorful jerseys.
Mustaches.
And a lot of mustaches and dudes that didn't work out, and they look like they're just kind of random dudes that drank beer after the game, which I appreciate. I think if you go with those blue jerseys, you should go pullover or you should go white pants. Go just the baby blue for the jerseys and go with white pants, because that's kind of more of what the minor leagues do, and I think it's a better look. And then tonight, you also have the intrigue with Jordan Hicks, where finally, after all of these rainouts, we're going to see Jordan Hicks in a start. Probably 3 innings at the most, but I'm intrigued, folks.
The flamethrower is back.
First game start for him since 2017, it looks like. Peoria was the last time that he actually took the mound in a real game start. He obviously has done a little bit of work down there in Memphis this year to get ready, but when you talk about approaching it long-term as a starter, obviously start his career in that space and going in, that's going to be what's interesting to see for me, because obviously, when you think about Jordan Hicks, you think about high octane. You're thinking about, that 102, 103 mile an hour, even higher than that fastball. How does he approach this any differently? Does he approach it differently, or does he just go out and give it that effort? And how long can he sustain that? That was what really stuck out to me when they made this decision to go with him in the rotation, is that how is that even going to stretch out, and how's that going to work?
Well, I think especially with his injuries, obviously with Tommy John surgery and stuff, it seems like he's changed his focus, and it seems like he's worked obviously with the coaches as well, where it's less about the velocity with him. I mean, of course, we're going to still see him throw probably triple digits, right? A couple of times.
I don't think he can help but do that.
Yeah, obviously. But I think that he's less focused on that and knows that if he wants to go longer because he's had these injuries, it's going to be less about the velocity.
I think with Jordan Hicks, it's so early, but I think so far so good. You like what you see. And I'll be the first one to say, and I think we did talk about this on the radio, that when I heard that they were going to turn Jordan Hicks into a starter, and it was specifically because of his recovery in the bullpen versus the actual rest you can get and the routine you can be on in a starter's workload. When I heard that, I kind of thought he was done-ish. In the sense of, because I just didn't think you took a guy who throws 106 and when healthy can be an unbelievable reliever and be an unbelievable closer. Are there a lot of instances of that really working, of putting that guy back into the rotation? And I think it's a different conversation. Like somebody like an Adam Wainwright, who was always going to be a starter, but then he went into the bullpen in 06. He's the closer.
Did him a solid.
They never had any idea they were going to keep Adam Wainwright in the bullpen. He was always going to be a starter. Whereas I understand Hicks came up as a starter, but I feel like that his role in the bullpen was long enough that he was now a reliever. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And so when I heard they're going to make him a starter, I just wondered, man, is his arm in such a shape that he can't bounce back from back-to-back appearances in the pen? Is this really going to work? It's so early. It's too early to judge, but I think it's going really well.
I had the thought that they were going to be going 6-man, honestly, when I heard that he was going to be starting, because I said there's no way they're going to be able to support that. He's not going to be working 6 innings into a game. So what does that mean for every other day? I thought it might be an indication of how they felt, like where they felt Michaelis was at. Did they need to limit innings? Do they need to do more? Is it an issue because of Flaherty being out? So I still think there's a lot to be revealed about how this is going to work and what the plan works out long term, but I'm really intrigued to see what he looks like and how he approaches the game from the beginning of it.
So Jordan Hicks tonight, you'd think if things go well, he's going to throw 3 innings. And you can back him up. So Jake Woodford pitched last on the 10th versus Pittsburgh and threw 3 innings. So a guy like that, you can back up. You can almost do a piggyback situation. Drew Verhagen is a guy who can give you length. I think early on, you're not loving what you're seeing from him yet, but it's still early there. I think they're able to build him up the right way. I'm talking about Jordan Hicks right now, but you're also entering a stretch where you have 1 million games in the next 3 weeks or so. So you can't have him only throw 3 innings for a long time, and I don't think that's the plan. But if he's able to go 3 and potentially 4 his next outing, you can get him up close to 5, and then you're also entering the period of the season where a lot of managers and pitching coaches will tell you that around middle of May, that's when they really start to turn you up as a starter anyway, because you're not probably taking Miles Michaelis out of that game last night if it's in June.
Sure.
At 86 pitches, 5 innings. But because of this weird lockout, weird spring training, nobody had a normal spring. Most of these guys, they're not across baseball letting guys throw 100 pitches. Most of these guys are out 85, 90, and I think you're going to see that for probably the next month-ish before they let guys really get turned loose and throw 107 pitches in a game.
Well, and I think that system will actually work out really well for Jordan Hicks, getting him more comfortable again with being a starter, all that kind of stuff. I feel like that will really benefit him and help him get more comfortable out there, because that's a pretty big deal coming back from an injury like that. And, I mean, you have that worry, that concern of, will I be able to throw like I used to, all that kind of stuff. And, I mean, he's been hungry to be a starter, so I feel like he can really take off with this.
It's pretty remarkable. The only other person I can think of that has had multiple injuries and still throw triple digits is Chapman.
Yeah.
And, like, he's, the only guy.
And Hicks seems to kind of be in that mold where it's just that this is what I do. This is the only way that I go about doing it. I'm just a physical freak. Jordan Hicks is one of those guys that, if you look at him on TV, kind of looks like a tall, long guy. When you're by him in person, he is like NFL quarterback size. He's a big guy. So it makes sense that he's doing that. The big piece that I'm interested to see is that will the Cardinals end up having an innings issue? Because, that was a knock on Steven Matz when he came in, that maybe he's not going to be a guy that's going to work, super deep in the games and do things like that. You obviously you have to watch Michaelis and where he's been as far as with his injury history, and you're bringing Dakota Hudson back at the same time. So to have yet another question mark kind of in the durability standpoint, it really puts a lot of pressure on the bullpen to be ready to go more days than not, and really puts a lot on Ali Marmol to make sure that he's managing that in the good place, because that's kind of a delicate situation. You could be walking dependent on it that often.
Look, knock on wood, though, I think the bullpen has been pretty good so far, like
Absolutely.
we brought up. I mean, they've been really, really good. There's a lot of names that you can bring up have really come up and done well in situations so far this season. So I think that's also really encouraging as well.
And here's the only thing that concerns me about it is that you've got the bigger roster right now due to them expanding it out to 28 to start the season, but you're going to lose a couple of people from that. And the logical way I look at it is probably going to be in the bullpen. They're pretty lean on the positional players as is. So somebody's going to have to start ramping. I think Michaelis might be a guy. He's had a couple of waste pitch innings so far this year. We had some big pitch counts that ran him up and got him out of games quicker. But you're going to really have to, I think Hudson's obviously, what happened his last start is not going to be the norm. It can't be. But Hudson's going to have to get there quicker. Matz is going to have to take that step so that when you do lose those extra options out the pen, you're not kind of held up because of it.
That's an interesting question also. So when you look at tonight, so Jordan Hicks, you're hoping he can go 3. If the Cardinals, if they were to get a nice lead, I think you'd like to throw Drew Verhagen in there and let him go multiple innings and maybe just figure things out. He's had a rough start so far, and he hasn't pitched since the 17th. Woodford, you're almost getting to a point too. He hasn't thrown since the 10th. You need to throw him out there just so he doesn't get rusty. I mean, there's not a lot of bullpen guys that want to go, 10, 11 days without throwing in a game situation.
That's how you get hurt.
And that's where you look at the bullpen, though. Brooke, I think that's a great point because, first of all, there's a lot of guys that you wondered about or you also didn't know about. Like, I'll be the first one to say I didn't know a lot about Andre Palante before the season started. Early on, you really like what you see. But that's also a guy that's easier to option than somebody else who has a contract. Like, Drew Verhagen, his ERA right now is over 7, but he's getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a guy they're going to be sending down anytime soon. So when you kind of look at where that move might happen, I mean, Cody Whitley, he's been good. Aaron Brooks. Ryan Hellsley is a guy, and he's not going to be optioned, but Ryan Hellsley is a guy that I've been very impressed with. And that was another one of those wild cards entering this season. Ryan Hellsley, for the last couple years, has not been to the level that we thought he could be. A couple years back, we're thinking Ryan Hellsley could be the Cardinals closer.
Yeah.
And at minimum, just a very legit high leverage reliever. And again, it's early, but in 4 innings, he has 8 strikeouts with a whip of 0.25, and batters are hitting less than 100 against him. I think that's a really good sign because we hadn't seen that out of him for a couple years. And if he's back and that's another weapon, you are constructing a really, really good, versatile bullpen with guys that can go 1 inning and a bunch of guys who can go multiple.
So I just want to bring up this. I was looking up this story. John Denton, who is now the Cardinals MLB.com writer, just came out with this really good story an hour ago about Jordan Hicks and the fact that he's kind of changed his mentality going into this start, saying Hicks is trying to reinvent himself as a starting pitcher who relies more on movement and location than one who simply blows batters away. I like that because I don't know if you remember, sometimes even when he was throwing some heat, batters figure you out. This is Major League Baseball. They will figure you out really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Rosenthal.
Yeah.
He had a flat fastball even though he threw 100.
Yeah. That doesn't even matter anymore sometimes because it's Major League Baseball. They'll figure it out. Jordan Hicks said, the velocity is still going to be there and it's not going to just disappear. If I need it, it will be there if the situation calls for it. I think that that's a great kind of approach coming into it.
Yeah. It's almost funny, too, though, when you hear that because when you think of Jordan Hicks, when you say, oh, he's going to dial it back, we're thinking that he's dialing it back from 106. I mean, he was still throwing triple digits in spring. And the dialed back version of Jordan Hicks can still be 98.
Yeah.
Which is still better than 99% of the entire league. I mean, that's how special his arm is.
So in looking at this, and we, talking about obviously the intrigue with him coming in, but we don't know where Jack Flaherty's at. I mean, he's starting to ramp up the workouts, getting closer to some mound work here, it seems. Is this just a little bit of a way to get Hicks more work, do we think? Because he obviously would be the one that would be moving out of the rotation if Flaherty came back.
Yeah, I just think it's also about the changing landscape of pitching, where back in the day, you always had starting pitchers and then you had relievers.
Sure.
And I know Tony La Russa comes in and he has more specialized guys, but we did fall into an era there where you mostly had 1 inning relievers, and you did have starters going longer. And I think a different way to look at it or speak about it, because you're hearing general managers, presidents of baseball ops talk about bulk. They'll say that's more a 1 inning guy. That's a bulk guy. Now, clearly a starter is a bulk guy, but I think instead of looking at, for example, Hicks, Woodford, Verhagen, instead of looking at those guys as a reliever, I would call those guys bulk guys, multiple inning pitchers. I think you're going to have more relievers who throw more amount of innings, but not as frequently. You're going to have more 2-inning type relievers, and that's just the way baseball's changing because these starters aren't going deep. They want to get these starters out after 100 pitches. Some of the analytics-driven organizations, they don't want the starter to face the lineup for the 3rd time. So there's more of an opportunity for the 2-inning reliever, and I think there's going to be a lot of guys like that. So if everybody stays healthy, Matt, to answer your question, clearly Jack Flaherty's getting a starting spot, but then all of a sudden you have Jordan Hicks. So early on, Jack Flaherty's not going to go 8 innings. I mean, you could flip it. You could flip it where when Jack Flaherty enters the rotation, he might only throw 4 innings. And now you have Jordan Hicks backing him up, or a situation like that.
I agree. I think that's going to be the best approach. And I think that, we saw a little bit of that as they tried to figure out what to do with Alex Reyes, and try to have it go back and forth like that. I just think that, to the point you made, Brooke, there's a lot of options in the bullpen. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to use them. I think it's going to be good when the roster goes down because some of those guys kind of get buried as it is right now. Like Aaron Brooks, they brought him back over from the KBO. And he's pitched 3 innings so far. We're into the, getting close to the end of the first month of the season. But you got to see what you got. I think some of the new option things that were put into the CBA about how often you can move guys back and forth is going to play into this. And eventually injuries will play a part in it too. It's inevitable. But I'm curious to see what this just means for Jordan Hicks' season because he's obviously a big part of the plan here in one way or another.
I just want to pivot to something just a little bit different other than pitching-wise. Did you guys find it? Oh,
you don't
is
like
that
this
okay?
conversation?
No, I like this conversation, but just kind of talking about rosters and all that kind of stuff. I think it was really interesting that Dylan Carlson had the day off yesterday. Was that interesting to anybody else or just me?
It was really interesting to my fantasy team because he was a mid-round pick, and I was expecting to get a steal.
He had a work day yesterday. Lars Nootbaar getting the start and right. I thought that was really interesting to see that.
Especially to be that young.
Yeah. And look, he hasn't been great at the plate, but typically they just kind of let you deal with it, right?
So Brooke, I feel like you might be insinuating a little Miami flu.
No.
Okay.
No,
okay.
not,
Maybe that was me.
Dylan Carlson doesn't strike me as that type. I will say there is a funny Jordan Hicks story. I'm sure he would be fine with me talking about this. I don't know. I hope. But spring training,
do it.
Just do it. Spring training, we go down there. We would wait by their lockers, try to get an interview with them, and I wanted to talk to Jordan Hicks. This was like, 2019 probably?
I think I remember the story.
Yeah, 2019. And every single day, I wanted to talk to Jordan Hicks because, he's the flamethrower. Everybody wants to talk to him. He would always come in with a coffee, and he'd be like, Brooke, I'm so hungover today. Like, I went out in Miami with some of the guys. I'll do it another day. He finally did give me the interview, like my final day down there. But I just thought it was so funny.
Hey, you got to have fun.
You got to have
Miami,
fun.
Young guy. He's taking care of business.
Yeah. As long as you show up, baby. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. It's all good.
Dylan Carlson, he's obviously struggled early, hitting 158, no power. That doesn't really kind of alarm me. I just think it's early on. You put a lot on him in terms of batting him leadoff right out of the gate. I think that's also just a different conversation. I'm guessing Dylan Carlson throughout his whole career, because he's a fast guy, but he doesn't really profile as your prototypical leadoff guy. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Dylan Carlson was a middle of the order hitter his entire life, all through high school, minor leagues, as he's climbing the ladder. And I'm not saying you have to totally readjust your strategy when you're the leadoff hitter, but I could see how a guy who's used to hitting 5th in the big leagues or 6th, or he's used to hitting 3-4, you put him in that spot. Maybe he's not totally comfortable where, okay, he sees pitches anyway, but do I have to see more pitches because I'm in the leadoff spot? Can I swing at the first pitch? Because as the leadoff guy, you kind of want to show your team what the pitcher has. I do think there's a different mindset sometimes to batting leadoff. And look, Matt Carpenter, he thrived in that spot.
Yeah.
I don't care what he says. He'd always say, oh, it has nothing to do. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. You were better hitting leadoff. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but it worked. So let's not mess with it.
Yeah, I think that it was surprising to me because I don't think I've ever heard of like a work day in Major League Baseball. So I was like, what is going on here? And Marmol kind of had some comments about just getting out of this little mini slump and just having a day where he can kind of like reset a little bit. Do you see that as a benefit because they have so much depth right now? The fact that you have a Lars Nootbaar. Albert Pujols has been doing pretty well as the designated hitter. You have Corey Dickerson. I mean, there's like a lot going on with this team.
I think it's good for Lars Nootbaar because, I mean, I think we were talking about yesterday, him and Sosa kind of got lost in the shuffle because I still think that they're trying to learn a little bit about how to maneuver in this new designated hitter full-time setup. Because, Sosa, 2 for 5 when he was out there, and I don't think we've really seen him much since. And so Lars Nootbaar getting his opportunities is going to matter because he's at that stage in his career where he's got to get at bats. I think Corey Dickerson might be a little bit better off not having to swing every day because he's been in the league for 10 years. But I want to see Lars get a chance, but you obviously, Dylan Carlson's the focus. You need him to get right. You need him to come out and have this work day, whatever that means, and then come out and show something today, I hope.
I wonder if it's also a little semantics. I think we label things differently nowadays. Back in the day, if you had a player who was struggling, You might say we're going to do a mental reset day.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to let them kind of get away from it. We might call that a work day now. I'm not sure.
I think that might be smarter. Mental reset day could trigger all sorts of things at this point. Yeah.
Nowadays, if you say that, people say you should call it something different. If I'm a manager, you call it a work day. With the older players, I always like the hockey term is the best with maintenance.
Maintenance,
I like maintenance
days. I do like when they say maintenance days.
But it makes sense. NFL calls it a veteran. They call it like if an older player doesn't practice on a Wednesday, all of a sudden the injury report, fantasy owners want to know, is that guy hurt? No.
Right.
He's 32. We don't want him practicing every day because he's 32 years old. That's where the NBA, they need to change the term. Load management is just not a good term.
Don't like it.
It's not a good term.
Doesn't sit well with me.
It doesn't make you think of what you're supposed to think of, and you should just call it a maintenance day. That's where hockey has it right. So if baseball wants to call it a work day, it's all good.